Hello, this is Amber Cook, and I will be reading my book report on Richard Louv's book, The Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. This book was published by Algonquin Books of Chapel Hill in 2005. It is no secret that children are spending less and less time in nature and more time inside in front of the television and computer. In his book, Last Child in the Woods, Richard Louv argues that this has led to a condition he coins nature deficit disorder, and he describes this as the human costs of alienation from nature, among them diminished use of the senses, attention difficulties, and higher rates of physical and emotional illnesses. His book examines research on this subject and concludes that direct exposure to nature is essential for healthy childhood development and for the physical and emotional health of children as well as adults. He examines this growing problem and makes suggestions regarding how this generation can stop the problem from worsening. He has traveled across the country studying, researching, and interviewing in order to gain insight into why children may be growing further and further from the natural world. Louv quotes a fourth grader who describes his play preferences. "I like to play indoors better because that's where all the electrical outlets are." This statement by this young child epitomizes the popular view of children today, a view which Louv argues will surely devastate the health of children in the future if not corrected. Now I'll move on to the reading summary. Louv broke his book up into 7 parts, so I'll briefly describe those and then do a conclusion. So, Louv begins his book by describing the new relationship between children and nature. He describes humans as part of the wilderness, despite the fact that we often view ourselves as separate from nature. He argues that many of the newer generations are taking nature's gifts for granted in everyday life. Although it seems nature is shrinking away with growing cities and more developed land, it is still out there. In Louv's eyes, parents, educators, adults, and the culture in general may say one thing about nature. They may tell children it's important and must be preserved, but actions speak louder than words, and children hear very well. Louv continues to describe what he calls the third frontier, which is populated by today's children. This frontier is characterized by 5 things: severance of the public and private mind from our food's origins, a disappearing line between machines, humans, and other animals, an increasingly intellectual understanding of our relationship with other animals, the invasion of our cities by wild animals, and the rise of a new kind of suburban form. These changes can be viewed in many developing countries, but especially in the United States. The criminalization of nature play has a great impact upon this. For example, private governments such as planned communities often constrict the outdoor play enjoyed by children. Public government also restricts children from nature in efforts to protect nature from humans. These problems accumulate to keep children from experiencing nature as their parents and grandparents have, and all contribute to nature deficit disorder. In the second part of the book, Louv describes why children, as well as the rest of us, need nature. Nature can provide a number of therapeutic and restorative properties. Nature can aid in diminishing a number of epidemics, including childhood obesity. With regards to emotional health, Louv states that, although countless children who suffer from mental illness and attention disorders do benefit from medication, the use of nature as an alternative, additional, or preventative therapy is often overlooked. It is argued that children need nature for healthy development of their senses and therefore for learning and creativity. This need is revealed by an examination of what happens to the senses of the young when they lose connection with nature and by witnessing the sensory magic that occurs when young people are exposed to a direct experience in a natural setting. Louv himself, along with many other researchers, have witnessed a child's eyes light up when he or she looks up into the starry night sky for the first time, catches a butterfly, or sees a wild animal for the first time. Gardner, a professor at Harvard University, developed his influential theory of multiple intelligences and has recently added an 8th type of intelligence called naturalist intelligence or nature smarts. Louv found that the many parents and educators found that their children seemed happier, more attentive, and healthier after spending time in nature. This finding, along with other evidence, shows why nature is so vital to a healthy childhood development. Next, Louv examines why children these days do not spend as much time outdoors. Some barriers are cultural or institutional, such as growing litigation and education trends. Some barriers are structural, such as the way cities are shaped and grow. Still other barriers are more personal and include time pressures and fear. It takes time to experience nature in a meaningful way, and the fast-paced life of our culture often does not allow for this. Fear of the unknown, including lurking wild animals or dangerous human predators, often weigh heavily in the minds of parents. Louv argues that real dangers do exist in nature, but the threat is greatly exaggerated by the media. The shrinking pool of environmentalists, conservationists, and other environmental stewards must be addressed in terms of these cultural issues that prevent children from becoming one with nature. In the following portion of the book, Louv makes suggestions regarding how to reunite children with nature. Louv argues that alone, parents cannot heal the broken bond. Educators, city planners, youth nature program leaders, environmentalists, etc. need to work together to encourage institutions to change. Louv then adds that mindless boredom can keep kids from nature, but constructive boredom can nurture a healthy child. A parent can do many things to nurture constructive boredom by spending more time with the child, turning the TV off, and finding a balance between adult direction and child boredom. Most of all, children need adults who understand the relationship between boredom, creativity, adults willing to spend time in nature with kids, and adults willing to set the stage so that kids can create their own play and enter nature through their own imaginations. Parents should be aware that the first physical entry point into nature is often the backyard. Parents should be encouraged to spend time in nature with their children and should teach their children to become familiar with a specific area in nature, such as a patch of woods or the shore of a nearby creek. Time is the key here, and dedicating time to spend with a child in nature is a big commitment. Of course, closing the nature divide is not as simple as making a list. Another suggestion Louv proposes is a change in park design, one that incorporates a more natural environment. These childhood experiences in nature make a child stronger, more observant, and more confident in his or her instincts. Mastering each environment builds the senses and common sense. Using nature as a moral teacher can also help reunite children with the outdoors. Louv uses the example of fishing and hunting as a suggestion to do this. Next, Louv discusses school reform. He contends that for more effective education reform, teachers need to free students from the classroom. Programs that have implemented this in schools have demonstrated better attendance and better behavior than students in traditional classrooms. Increasing number of parents in schools need to realize the importance and the magic of providing hands-on, intimate contact between children and nature as a larger part of a child's education. Ideally, school nature programs will go beyond curriculum or field trips. Schools could begin to build stronger, more significant relationships with agricultural associations, nature centers, environmental organizations, and bird sanctuaries rather than using them for one-time visits. Louv then continues to talk about opening the fourth frontier. He states that one goal in the fourth frontier should be a nationwide review of laws governing private land and recreation, especially those involving children. This review process should be public. It should invite parents, children, experts on child's play, and others to offer testimonials. It should be done with the goal of protecting both the child's safety and the child's right to natural play. It should focus on reducing the anxiety of parents and children and the fear of lawyers that adds to modern barriers separating children from natural play. Community associations should also review their covenants to decide where they stand on the criminalization of nature play. This legal tangle of outdoor play will be one of the most difficult challenges in the fourth frontier. In conclusion, Louv touches on the spiritual necessity of nature for the young. Through research, he found that many parents were committed to sharing this connection with their children, but faced challenges when it came to how to explain the spirituality of nature, or rather, spirituality in nature. The challenges lie in not tripping on the tangled vines of biblical interpretation, semantics, and politics. Nature introduces children to the idea that they are not alone in the world, and that realities and dimensions exist alongside their own. Many places of worship are going green, and environmental organizations are increasingly likely to evoke the spirituality of nature. This faith-based environmentalism can create powerful unions. Many scientists argue that the practice and teaching of science must rediscover or acknowledge the mystery of nature and therefore its spiritual aspect. In conclusion, Louvre states that healing the broken bond between children and nature may seem to be an overwhelming, even impossible task, but we must hold the conviction that the direction of this trend can be changed, or at least slowed. Deeper knowledge will also bring more power. Further research needs to be done to more deeply examine how nature affects childhood development. And although this may be expensive to gather, this knowledge could have enormous influence in the fight to preserve and ultimately increase the amount of nature available to children and to us all. So next I'll move on to my analysis of the book. Louvre's main objective in this work was obviously to help people understand the importance of nature for healthy childhood development. His arguments are meant to support the premise that nature deficit disorder is prevalent and a growing epidemic in children of this generation. I would argue that Louvre successfully got this point across to the audience. However, although I'm convinced that children do not experience nature as much as they should, I am not convinced that it has such a great impact on development as Louvre believes. Development is an extremely complex process, and although nature may serve important, I do not believe that it is as essential as Louvre states. Yes, children learn a lot through experiences in nature. They may develop friendships through nature and gain confidence in themselves, but other aspects of development are influenced by many other factors. Louvre does not present any counter-arguments to his points regarding this subject. This lack of counter-arguments makes Louvre seem as though he is preaching on a soapbox. He overly relies on nostalgia and cheesy imagined scenes. In doing this, he undermines his greatest argument by presenting it as obvious. Louvre does a very thorough job of describing the nature deficit disorder and does a good job of trying to determine the underlying cause of this. It is tempting, of course, to point our fingers at the usual culprits of television and video games when trying to determine the source of this problem, but Louvre is quick to point out that such an oversimplification only prevents us from recognizing the more subtle issues involved. However, Louvre spends his time citing mainly anecdotal evidence, which is unconvincing to a reader with a scientific mind. Louvre's arguments would have been better presented if they were backed up by scientific evidence as well as personal stories and anecdotes. People believe proven facts. The main themes in this book were the new relationship between children and nature, why children and the rest of us need nature, why children don't spend more time outside anymore, how to reunite children with nature, bringing nature into education, the spiritual importance of nature, and finally, how to open a fourth frontier that is more conducive to the child-nature relationship. I think these themes do a good job of discussing the main issues that the audience will want to be informed about. I believe Louvre wrote this book with the intent of reaching an audience that consists of any adult having contact with children. Educators, parents, environmentalists, healthcare professionals, and any adult that has interactions with children could benefit from the knowledge this book presents. However, I believe that the writing is most geared towards educators and parents. Louvre spends a lot of time interviewing teachers and parents of children, and therefore his arguments are more likely to hit home with this group of readers. For me as a future nurse, the writing was interesting because as a healthcare provider, I will see children who are most likely unhealthy. To think about nature deficit as a factor that may contribute to this unhealthiness is something I have not considered before. Normally, we think of physical causes of disease and injury such as medications, diet, family history, exercise, genetics, hours of sleep, etc. For example, when a child presents with an attention problem, the standard protocol for treatment is behavioral therapy and medication. I would argue that not many healthcare providers would automatically think about the fact that this child would benefit from a more intimate relationship with nature. Reading this book definitely changed the way that I will think about taking care of children in the future. I am not totally convinced by Louvre's arguments, but the concept of a nature deficit disorder will certainly be in the back of my mind. I would highly recommend this book to others, especially teachers, church leaders, parents, and others working closely with children. I think it brings up an important topic that needs to be considered as children begin to spend more and more time inside rather than outside. With childhood obesity increasing at a rapid rate and the number of children on medication for depression, anxiety, and attention deficit disorder, I think it's important for us to examine any possible solution